Hi, this is Swati Seela from the Software Testing Help Group, and today in this session we are going to learn about regression testing. Regression testing is a form of functional testing. It is one of the stages that happen in every testing cycles almost mandatorily. Now, regression testing, the simplest way to understand regression testing is in two parts. The first part that we need to understand about regression testing is that it is a form of retesting. And the second thing that we need to understand is the intent. That means, why is this retesting being done? Now, to answer the first part of this question, retest is nothing but repeating a particular test. Say you have a test where you are trying to check the login of a particular application. So how would you basically test it for the first time? You would enter the username. So you would basically perform step 1, which is entering the username probably. Step 2 will be entering your password. Step 3 would be clicking on the OK or the sign in button. And finally, the expected result would be whether the login has been successful or not. So these being the 3 steps of your test, if for the second time you're performing these 3 steps one more time, that is simply retest. Now, there might be many other reasons why you would do this retest. For example, the first time you were performing, step 1, 2, and 3, say your phone rang and you were trying to answer your phone and you did not pay particular attention to how much time it took after you click the OK button for it to take you into the login screen, or you were not paying particular attention to, the other components on the login screen or whatever that might be. So to visit or to see the next time, paying more particular attention to some of the items on the screen, you might want to perform the test the second time. So that simply is a repetition of the test that was already performed. Here, the intention is basically to pay more attention the second time around. But first part of regression testing, as I said, is nothing but repetition of a particular test which has already been executed on your AUT once. Now, what really makes the entire difference is the intent of why we are doing this. Now, regression testing is performed mainly for one reason, that any code changes, any modification to the code, that is, the software, programmatic sentences that in turn, that work together to produce our user interface that we see as users. Any of that backend code, if it changes for any of the reasons, so whatever the reason might be, some common reasons are bug fixes. So when a certain defect is found, a corrective action has to be taken in the code, and that generally causes an action which reflects in the change of the code at the backend. Now, this code change, in the case of bug fix, does not necessarily mean that everything will go 100% correct. So when I have modified my code, or when I have manipulated my code to make sure that a certain defect is removed, is there any guarantee that this kind of manipulation of the code has not introduced any new bugs? Not really, correct? So any sort of change that is made to the code, whether a piece of code has been added, removed, or the existing code has been modified, any sort of these differences might accidentally, unintentionally cause bigger issues if we do not, test the functionality around it. So code changes are the reason why we perform the regression test. So again, going back to our two segment definition, regression testing is retesting or repeating a particular test on your application in the case when there is any code change that happens. And code change could happen due to bug fixes, or it could happen because of new changes, or in other words, when the scope of the software grows. So usually all the existing requirements getting removed from the software is a rare occurrence. It's just that the software gets added new requirements, so the scope increases. So when there is a new requirement that is being made a part of your existing code, that's when code also changes. So regression testing is retesting or repeating a particular test on your AUT in the case of bug fixes or when new requirements are added, to make sure that none of the existing code or the functionality that is around this bug fix or the code change has not been broken by accident or any other reason. So that's basically regression testing. There is a little bit a sort of much more classification into the regression testing topic. So regression testing, when is it done? For one, we understand that whenever there is a bug that got fixed, say for example in the login screen when a certain notification message is supposed to be displayed, okay? And say this notification message was not coming up earlier. So the code gets added to include this notification message from now on. So once this bug gets fixed and comes to the state of retest, we would basically repeat the test that validates the notification. So this is just to retest the bug fix. But in addition to that, regression testing would be testing the entire login page, not just for the notification message test case, to make sure nothing else in the in the functionality surrounding the bug fix has broken down. And the second case in which regression test happens is when newer versions of software come up. So for version 1 of the software, for simplicity's sake, let's start with number 1. When version 1 of the software gets released, if say there are 100 test cases corresponding to this version 1, all 100 test cases would be executed for the very first time. Let's say there's a version 2, which is added requirements in there. So if version 1 started out with 10 requirements and version 2 has the original 10 and 5 of the new requirements added over it, then the version 2 testing would consist of the regression testing of version 1, which is the 100 test cases, plus the test cases relating to these 5 new requirements, how many ever they might be. So regression testing is generally a part and parcel of our testing suites, because every time a new version or a new instance of your AOT comes out in the market, it is almost customary for us to go back and make sure that the existing functionality has not broken, because a new version means a change in the scope, which means change or addition into the code, which generally, to be on the safer side, we need to make sure that the existing functionality has not broken down. And in the case of bug fixes, around the bug that got fixed, to make sure that no new errors are introduced into your system. So this is basically regression testing. A little more deeper into this concept, let's say this is the structure in which the application under test is designed. Say there's a module A which interacts directly with module B and has an interaction with module C. So from this diagram, we can say that A and B have a direct interaction, while A and C have an indirect interaction. Let's say in module A, a bug was found and was fixed and came to the testers for retest. So depending on the time, depending on the severity of this issue, depending on how much budget we have allocated for this particular project, we have 3 types of regression that we could perform. The first one is unit regression testing. So unit regression testing is similar to the example that we talked about earlier. When a certain notification message related issue comes up, and when that gets fixed in turn, we are going to check the functionality, not just about the notification but around it. So we are considering the entire unit. So that's basically unit regression testing. So if there was an issue found in module A which got fixed, in addition to checking the issue, we would also check all the functionality of module A. Now this is in the case of a medium severity issue. If you found like a very simple issue which wasn't a big deal, then confining just to the unit and regressing the functionality of that particular unit will generally suffice. But if at all the problem was a major one, and if you suspect that it could have impacted the other modules that directly relate to it, we would perform a partial regression testing, which means you would regress the functionality around A and B since they are directly related. So this does not have to be every time. It just depends on the severity of the issue that we found. And when I say severity, I'm not just talking about the parameter severity that is assigned in the bug report. I'm talking more of the impact-wise situation. So how much of this problem that we found in A might cause the breaking of B. So that sort of analysis, if there is any reason to believe that the problem that we encountered in A might break B, in that case we would do a partial regression testing where we would entirely test the module A plus module B. And the third form is the full regression testing. So in full regression testing, you would even consider the modules that have an indirect impact. This again depends on the nature of the bug that you encounter or the nature of the addition of code that you're making in case of a scope improvement, scope enhancement, or adding of the scope. So to sum up, regression testing is retesting with the intention of uncovering any accidental errors that might have crept up during the code change that might happen because of a bug fix or because of the scope being increased or new requirements getting added. The typical areas in which we perform regression testing are when you would have already existing defect fixed and you would test the functionality around it, or in the case when a new version comes up, you would make sure that the already existing functionality is intact before we move on to the new testing of the new versions. So there are three forms of regression testing: unit testing, unit regression testing, partial regression testing, and full regression testing. In the unit regression testing, we would only perform testing of the module in which the defect was encountered or the module in which the code change has taken place. In partial regression testing, we consider the module plus the module that it has a direct relationship to, in our example, A and B. In the third case, which is the full regression testing, we would consider all the modules, even though some of the modules might interact, not very directly, indirectly. So these are the basics that that we talk about, that comprise the regression testing topic. So thank you all for listening.